you'll be delighted to know this is a very brief presentation, so I know we're moving on during the morning. So just what I want to talk about quite briefly is some innovation within the JNLR. We did quite a while back start a formal consultative process with you all to get feedback from you about the JNLR. And what the feedback essentially said is that the JNLR is absolutely widely trusted and is used universally in planning in agencies and with advertisers. It also is seen as a very trusted source of information, providing stable data. But there was a question for looking at a more holistic view of audio, both FM listening and digital audio listening. So we listened to you, and we listened to our customers, and the plan is going forward that we are going to look at undertaking a proof of concept which will take current audience data and together with IP data deliver research that will provide both listening to FM and listening through a digital device. And how we're going to do this, in very brief terms, is take the log data and then apply modeling techniques that will predict the demographics behind the IP data. Now, there's a lot to that. I'm not going to go into that detail today, but that's the plan, that we will do that, and that will allow agencies and advertisers to then see listening through FM and listening through digital IP. But also that the system will align and integrate with the current JNLR system, so the currency will remain consistent and stable. So what does that mean in real life, I suppose? So currently, the current methodology provides listening to radio, both broadcast radio and streaming radio. And the plan is, with potential new methodology, you'll still get that total view, but you'll be able to break out listening through broadcast FM or potentially DAB, and through streaming, and that'll be separated out, and that is the plan. We're working on this starting in early 2026, and we'll be back to you with a lot more details about that into the new year, and we'll keep in touch with you about how that is developing. So I think that's a good segue into the Irish Audio Report, which comes out once a year, and it's literally hot off the press. We just have the figures just very recently released. Ciaran is going to provide some brief highlights, and then we'll have a webinar with more detail in a few weeks.
Hi everybody, thanks for coming here to this event and for inviting me to share some of the highlights of the current audio report. So the report is based on a special module of questions that are put to our respondents in Q2 every year. So it's based on more than 3,000 respondents who did participate in the research. So a good sample size, which we always look for. The questions that were included or that were added to the core interview aim to identify the behavior of individuals in the broader audio space. You know, listening to live radio, listening to streaming, listening to podcasts, listening back, and so on. So to get the full picture, which we don't get from the main core JNLR, which focuses on radio and focuses on the different brands of radio. So that's what we were trying to do. And as I said, the interviews took place throughout April, May, and June. So first of all, we find that there's almost universal engagement in audio content on the measure of past week or weekly listening. So a huge proportion of the adult population, those aged 15 plus, are tuning in. More than 96% of the population, which is represents 4.2 million people. So it's a huge area, huge interest in this area, in this audio content. So great engagement there, which is so positive. In that space, as we've seen in previous reports over the years, we see that radio prevails as the dominant form of audio content consumed. 88.6% say they listened to live radio in the past week. And this compares to 55.7% or almost 56% of people who listen to on-demand online audio in the past week. When we look specifically at the individual elements that make up that on-demand audio, we can see here following live radio at almost 89%. The next most listened to format is music streaming. And 40% of the population say they listen to music streaming on a weekly basis. 31% listen to YouTube music. 22% listen to a podcast. And 16% listen to their own music. So in other words, their own archive music, whether that's CDs or vinyls or downloads. It's at that level. And 6% say they listen back to on-demand to Irish radio. So there's obviously a lot of crossover listening between all of those different formats. But as we see, radio is the dominant format in that particular space. When you look at across different demographics, we can see that, we will see that live radio is the leading format across all age groups, young and older ones, but that among the younger groups, on-demand is listened to a higher than average degree among the younger audiences. So when we focus on yesterday and yesterday listening, we asked our respondents to give us an estimate of time spent on the different types of formats. And this chart aims to give a visualization to those kind of estimates. So we can see the analysis is based among format listeners, so they're directly comparable to each other. So for example, on the left, we can see that live radio has the highest bar there. And if we compare that to music streaming, it's almost double that. So that's telling us that more time is spent listening to live radio than to any of those other formats. And more than twice the time when you compare across the different formats. And that's probably due in some part to the kind of curated nature or the episodic nature of podcasts and playlists and so on. You're looking for something specific for a specific occasion or reason, and it will be more time sensitive, I suppose. This pattern of listening to audio will naturally impact on the share of time spent. So if you have more people listening for a longer period of time, that'll naturally impact on the share of time. So we can see when we look at this analysis, which identifies the share of audio, we can see that live radio does achieve the highest share at almost 74%. So remember, more people are listening to radio and they're listening for a longer amount of time. So naturally, that's going to result in a higher share for live radio. So at 73.8%, it's in the leading position there. If we isolate when we look at music streaming, if we isolate the respondents who pay a premium who pay for a premium service for Spotify, for example, Spotify Premium, we can isolate the share to music streaming that's paid for, and that's 10.5%, compared to music streaming that's freely available, and that has a share of 3%. We can do the same with the YouTube music, where we isolate again the respondents and the time spent on the premium service, and that's at 2.3% compared to the free service at 4.1%. Other items, our own music, it achieves a 2.4% of the total audio time spent, and podcasts at 3.5%. Listen back to Irish radio at 0.3%. So this is very much the picture of the average day. We focused on yesterday. What did you do? What were you listening to? And how much time did you spend listening? So, just finally to say, obviously not all, from a commercial perspective, when we know that there's an option to buy premium services that exclude advertising, we can see that would obviously show a different picture. So if we look at that share table again and look at that analysis again and strip out the time spent on our own music, for example, because that's free of advertising, and the paid for premium minutes, We stripped those out. We have a completely different complexion now for our share. We can see that live radio, the share increases to 87%. YouTube Music, the free service at 4.8%. Music streaming, the free service at 3.6%. And podcasting at 4.2%, with listen back to Irish radio at 0.4%. So there's two different ways to look at this data. We have the overall picture of I suppose, share of ears, if you like, and then we can look at it from a commercial perspective when we think of the impact of those spaces where ads aren't available or aren't available to be bought. So that's really a few of the quick highlights. We will be looking in more detail. Radio Centre in Ciaran is going to host a webinar in November. So we'll be able to look at some trends. We'll be able to look in more detail at certain key demographics. And we also have some questions in there. We asked people, where were they when they were listening and what devices were they using to listen. So we look forward to seeing you at that.
Just to say that when that's on, it's on the 13th of November, 12 p.m. It's a webinar. It'll be on the newsletter, the usual format. So please sign up and we go through. There's a huge amount of data in detail. The results are only out, so we haven't even looked through all the data in detail yet. But the detailed data will be presented by Karen and the Ipsos team on the 30th of November. So hopefully see you then. Thank you very much.
Thank you.